Helen Keller was a vital part of the deaf movement. Up until she came about, the deaf were thought of as dumb individuals that were not held to the same level as normal society. She proved this stigma wrong by overcoming her disabilities and learning how to function at a higher level. By doing this, she has motivated generations of people to overcome adversity and accomplish any goal that they set for themselves. Helen was born on June 27, 1880. She was raised in Tuscumbia, Alabama, in her family home of Ivy Green. Her home became known as the Ivy Green because of all the English ivy that grew around the property. Her parents were Arthur Keller and Kate Adams. When she was about 19 months old, Helen became ill, and when the sickness passed, she was left both deaf and blind. Although the exact cause of her hearing and sight impairments is unknown, it's believed to be attributed to either the scarlet fever or meningitis. By being cut off from the world at such an early age, Helen became a wild child, acting completely out of impulse and doing as she pleased. Before her 7th birthday, her mother became encouraged by the story of another deaf and blind girl by the name of Laura Bridgman that learned to communicate. At this time, Helen and her father went on a search that would forever change her life. During their travels, they were put in contact with Alexander Graham Bell, who sent them to the Perkins Institute for the Blind. It was there at Perkins that Helen was introduced to the woman that would shape the rest of her life. Her name was Anne Sullivan, and she would spend the next 49 years of her life by Helen's side, constantly spelling out everything that was said into her hand. With the help of Anne, Helen learned to identify the things in her world with names which Anne would spell out. Eventually, Anne was successful in teaching her how to read and type in Braille. Her biggest breakthrough was learning to speak. She accomplished this feat at the Horace Mann School for the Deaf, with instruction from Sarah Fuller, a believer in the oral method of learning for the deaf. If she had never learned to speak, she would never have been able to become the great lecturer and activist that she was. In 1896, Helen was able to attend the Cambridge School for Young Ladies, which at the time was a preparatory school for the Radcliffe College. It was here at Radcliffe that Helen would be the first deaf-blind person to earn a Bachelor's of Arts, cum laude nonetheless. Helen spent her life writing books, raising funds and awareness for the deaf and blind communities. Her most famous writing was which she completed while still a student at Radcliffe College. Her book, The Story of My Life, to this day is her most recognized work and has been translated to over 50 languages. With the exception of one story, all of Helen's writings were nonfiction. There was so much controversy surrounding her fictional story, The Frost King, that she became so traumatized that she never made another attempt at fictional writing. She wrote The Frost King when she was 12 years old and was called a fraud and a liar by the teachers at her school. After being exonerated, she made a choice to stick to non-fictional writing. Helen lived with Anne Sullivan and Anne's husband, John Macy, until Anne's death in 1936. At this point, Helen was kept company by Anne's hired help, Polly Thompson, and they vacated the Macy home for one in which Helen would live out the remainder of her days in Connecticut. In 1964, Helen received the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Although she had been retired from the public eye for 3 years, she was never forgotten, and President Lyndon B. Johnson presented her with this award based on all the achievements she had made for the deaf and blind communities throughout her life. To this day, all of the advancements in the treatment of these groups of people can be traced back to her involvement. When Polly fell ill, a nurse named Winnie Corbley joined them, and she would stay with Helen until her death on June 1st, 1968. Helen suffered from stroke the last 7 years of her life, but she died peacefully in her sleep while at her home of Arkin Ridge in Easton, Connecticut. Helen Keller was, and still is, an inspiration to many people around the world. She proved that no matter your disability, you can always set out to achieve great things if you focus and put your mind to it. If a person that was as limited as her could become a successful, vital, well-respected, influential part of society, then anybody can do it with the right amount of motivation and support. Thank you.